Well, good afternoon. This is the Hound Dog coming to you on the 26th of March. It is Sunday, late afternoon, and boy oh boy, it is nice to see some light in the sky this late in the day. It's been a long time coming. Went out and bought some seeds today, so yes, we're getting getting excited about spring. Anyway, I'm starting off in a sort of light-hearted fashion there, but this is actually quite a serious video, and it's because we are in a very strange time out there in the real world. And what I'm seeing is the total polarization of left and right. Even moderate liberals in Canada have become extreme left-wing, almost radical in their hatred that Trump has brought on. I mean, it's incredible to watch. We are now 60 days past the election, or the inauguration, sorry, a full 4 months past the actual election, and the screaming has not stopped, whether it's in the newspaper, the media, on television, on the computer here. I have friends where you actually dare not express even a moderate opinion, because a moderate opinion appears to be a vote for Trump. I don't know where we ever stopped, trying to analyze the whole situation. Or maybe we never did. I don't know. I know I've certainly talked a lot about politics all my life, and but I've come to realize, that this left-right paradigm is two sides of the same coin. Okay, and when you're seeing the kind of distraction that Donald Trump is causing, look elsewhere. That's not where you need to be looking. Because, believe you me, when there is a distraction like that, it's meant to draw your attention away from the real issues taking place. And that could be manifold right now. Who knows what Trump is there to bring in? I don't know what... who knows what might happen. But as long as we fall for this "yah-boo," I hate you, sort of attitude, and I don't think I've ever seen it this polarized. I mean, people that I know hated Bush, but not like this. And I can only think that this is the media driving this, because it seems, especially on television, everywhere you look, there is just this rabid hatred for Trump. Okay, and as I say, I think this is a distraction. I think we need to be aware that it's a distraction. I think we need to be looking what is going on elsewhere. Maybe it's environmentally, maybe it is the XL pipeline, maybe it is the suddenly accelerated and increased war over in Syria and Iraq. Is it the union between Turkey, Russia, the United States, and Syria? What we are getting upset with Trump about is really, these issues they're not significant issues. Okay, the Republicans and the Democrats both know how to fix Obamacare, and I am humbly suggesting that an OHIP be used as a model. Yes, OHIP is not perfect. I will be the first to admit that, but having the insurance being a not-for-profit organization, we hope they're not-for-profit, it basically keeps a level playing field as far as insurance is concerned, and what can be charged for particular kinds of surgery. And in Canada here, you know, doctors, surgeons, yes, they're paid good money, there is absolutely no doubt about it. But in America, it is absolutely insane. You know, we had a neurosurgeon move into this area, and he had a 36,000 square foot cottage built on Sturgeon Lake here. A 1,600 square foot deck. 1,200 square foot master bedroom. That's bigger than my whole house. One bedroom is bigger than my whole house. Now, there is no need for that. Anyways, as long as we keep falling for this red-blue paradigm, we are going to be suckered in again, and what we're doing right now is we're wasting valuable energy arguing amongst ourselves.
There are certain issues that people on the left and the right in American politics will never discuss. And the reason they won't discuss them is because they agree mutually. The Democrats and the Republicans agree on something, so they don't want to talk about it in public debate because it reveals the fact that they're basically the same. They only talk about things on which they disagree. Turns out that the things on which they agree are the most important things. The things in which they disagree are relatively minor.
We need to understand that we have been artificially divided for far too long. The global elites have divided us into Democrat and Republican, left and right, conservative and liberal. They have divided us with hot button issues like abortion and gay rights and gun control and prayer in schools.
So when all this comes down, who will you obey? Who will you obey? Will you take orders from a complete stranger? You think not? Take a look.
Hey, this man. He's Charlie, our actor, dressed to look like he's in charge, though he's in charge of nothing except a bogus uniform. We've brought him to Edmonton in North London, to the shopping centre, to find out exactly how obedient people are.
Excuse me, madam, sorry, could I just stop you? You're about to pass between me and the red bench. Could I just ask you to go the other side? Thanks. That's great. Oh, and just beyond the apple would be great. Oh, look. Thanks very much, madam. These slabs, I couldn't just ask you to knock it down for me. You're probably heavier than I am. Can you give it a good old jump? Yeah, actually, let me move that way. Can you just jump, please? Yeah, no, two-footed probably, best. I couldn't just ask you to litter, could I?
To what, sorry?
To litter.
To litter?
Yeah, have you got anything you could possibly quickly litter? Do you use that? It's probably all right.
Okay.
Yeah, could you just litter for me, please, sir? Just twice would be great. Just kick it away, otherwise it won't. That's it. Give it a kick. Couldn't ask you just to pop that in your other hand, could I? Thanks, that's excellent. Could I ask you to lead with your left? Yes? And just slowly, really, basically.
It's a simple experiment, but amazingly, it works. Out of uniform, though, it's a different story.
Oh, sir, could I just ask you to switch bags with your hands? Just... You couldn't just go and just touch that brick? No?
But with the uniform, 70% of people follow Charlie's bizarre instructions to the letter.
Oh, fine. Give it one more, actually. The wind's a bit weak. That's it. You got my dental records here. That's proof enough that this is quality sweet corn. Bit harder, please, sir.
He's in uniform.
Stop the bag.
So they obey.
A military salute that was then extended out toward the flag. In practice, the second gesture was performed palm down. The pledge was written in 1892 by Francis Bellamy. Francis was the cousin to Edward Bellamy, author of an international bestseller that launched the nationalism movement. Edward's book was translated into every major language, including German. Francis and Edward were both self-proclaimed socialists in the nationalism movement, and they promoted military socialism. The Bellamys wanted government to take over all schools.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to
good, kids. Now come and get your Ritalin.
And you know, these elites are clever tricksters. They have played the game before and they know exactly how to disrupt things. Take a look if you don't believe me.
My dad's blue-eyed. He's never kicked me. Greg's dad is blue-eyed. He's never kicked him. Rex's dad is blue-eyed. He's never kicked him. This is a fact. Blue-eyed people are better than brown-eyed people. Are you brown-eyed or blue-eyed?
Blue.
Why are you shaking your head?
I don't know.
Are you sure that you're right? Why? What makes you so sure that you're right?
I don't know.
The blue-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess, while the brown-eyed people have to stay in. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground because you are not as good as blue-eyed people. Well, the brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. On page 127. 127. Is everyone ready? Everyone but Laurie. Ready, Laurie?
Brown-eyed.
She's a brown-eyed. You'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. The yardstick's gone. Well, okay. I don't see the yardstick. Do you?
It's probably over there. Hey, Miss Lady, you better keep that on your desk so if the brown-eyed people get out of hand.
Oh! You think if the brown-eyed people get out of hand, that would be the thing to use? Who goes first to lunch?
Blue-eyed.
The blue-eyed people. No brown-eyed people go back for seconds. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
They're not smart.
Is that the only reason?
It'll take too much.
It might take too much. Okay, quietly.
And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us.
The way they treated you, you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything.
It seemed like Mrs. Elliott was taking our best friends away from us. And they were calling us blue eyes. I wasn't. Sandy and Donna were. Yeah.
What's wrong with being called brown-eyed?
It means that we're stupider. Well, not that, but... Oh, that's just the same way as other people calling black people niggers. Yeah.
Is that the reason you hit him, John? Did it help? Did it stop him? Did it make you feel better inside? Make you feel better inside? Did it make you feel better to call him Brown Eyes? Why do you suppose you call him Brown Eyes?
Probably because he has brown eyes.
Is that the only reason? He didn't call him Brown Eyes yesterday, and he had brown eyes yesterday. Didn't he?
Because we just saw
Yeah, ever since you put those blue things on there, tease them. Kind of tease them.
Oh, is this teasing?
No. Well, he did it.
Were you doing it for fun, to be funny, or were you doing it to be mean? I don't know. Don't ask me. Did anyone laugh at you when you did it?
I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes.
Back during slavery, when black people like me talked to the slaves, they didn't kill him. They'd send some old house Negro along behind him to undo what he said. You have to read the history of slavery to understand this. There were two kinds of Negroes. There was that old house Negro and the field Negro. And the house Negro always looked out for his master. When the field Negroes got too much out of line, he held them back in check. He put them back on the plantation. The house Negro could afford to do that because he lived better than the field Negro. He ate better, he dressed better, and he lived in a better house. He lived right up next to his master in the attic or the basement. He ate the same food his master ate and wore his same clothes. And he could talk just like his master, good diction. And he loved his master more than his master loved himself. That's why he didn't want his master hurt. If the master got sick, he'd say, "What's the matter, boss? We sick?" When the master's house caught a fire, he'd try and put the fire out. He didn't want his master's house burned. He never wanted his master's property threatened. And he was more defensive of it than the master was. That was the house Negro.
The mind. The mind is a very malleable thing. You have to be so careful what you put into your mind. It is the most flexible, ready to, it's like fertile ground. It is like, I've heard it described as a farmer's field. Whatever you plant in the mind, it will grow. And I think that is a pretty accurate description.
On the surface, Dugard's behavior seems bizarre, but it's typical of a psychological phenomenon known as Stockholm Syndrome. Victims of Stockholm Syndrome develop compassion and loyalty towards their captors. The condition follows psychologically traumatizing situations like hostage situations and kidnappings. In fact, Stockholm Syndrome got its name in 1973 when two thieves accosted a bank in Stockholm, Sweden, taking 4 bank employees hostage. For 6 days, the prisoners were held in a bank vault, tied to explosives with nooses around their necks. During a rescue attempt, police were shocked when the captives took offense, siding with the captors. Like the Stockholm victims, people who develop this condition endure situations where they're forced to contemplate the reality of severe injury or death. In order for Stockholm Syndrome to develop, a victim must also perceive that her captors have shown occasional kindnesses. Being permitted to eat, not being punished for a so-called transgression, and even being allowed to live are all considered benevolent to someone with Stockholm Syndrome. People with Stockholm experience symptoms similar to post-traumatic stress disorder patients. They may have flashbacks, nightmares, distrust of others, and the inability to enjoy previously pleasurable activities. No one is sure why this phenomenon occurs, but it has been suggested that a victim believes, perhaps unconsciously, that forming an attachment to her captor maximizes her survival. Oddly, Stockholm Syndrome doesn't resolve in tandem with the end of a hostage situation. In the 1973 bank robbing, the freed hostages remained loyal to their captors, even setting up a fund to cover the criminals' legal fees.
And we've really worked hard at it. Many social scientists who've worked with monkeys and this kind of stuff, who are really studying human behavior after all, have amassed an incredible amount of information on how to beguile us and to hoodwink us. I'm sure a lot of these experiments that are coming up you would not be allowed to do today.
In the 1950s, Harry Harlow conducted a series of famous but controversial experiments on monkeys at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Harlow's findings had substantial implications on our understanding of attachment, but by today's standards, his work would largely be considered unethical. In one of his most famous experiments, Harlow separated young monkeys from their mothers as soon as they were born and stuck them in cages with two fake mothers, a soft one wrapped in cloth that did nothing, and a cold mechanical mother made of wire that nonetheless did provide food. But despite being a cupboard mother, the young baby monkeys didn't bond with her. When Harlow or his team scared the baby monkeys with a strange contraption, the monkeys ran and clinged not to their wire source of life-sustaining nourishment, but to the soft, cuddly, and otherwise useless cloth mother. This suggested that warmth and comfort was more important than food when it came to nurturing attachment. Harlow also built a rejecting mother, which used a blast of pressurized air to push baby monkeys away. But instead of finding another source of comfort, these monkeys clung even tighter at all times than monkeys raised without rejecting mothers. And this is what blows my mind. The instinct for warmth and comfort in newborn creatures is so strong, it not only resists attempts to frustrate it, but is paradoxically strengthened by it. Eckhard Hess tested this by using electric shocks to discourage ducklings from following the object they were imprinted on, but it only strengthened the behavior and made them follow more closely than ever before. The fact that a wire mother or a rejecting mother or receiving electric shocks for attaching to your mother would cause more attachment, more love, more dependence seems like a paradox. But paradoxes can teach us. As Oscar Wilde put it, a paradox is the truth standing on its head to attract attention. And what gets our attention here is the effect uncertainty can have. In 1955, A.E. Fisher conducted an experiment on puppies. His team separated puppies into 3 groups. Members of the first group were treated kindly every time they approached a researcher. Members of the second group were punished for approaching the researchers, and puppies in the third group were randomly treated kindly or punished. They grew up never knowing what to expect. Their world was not a world of kindness or punishment, but rather one of uncertainty. What's really chilling is that the study found that that group, the third group of puppies, wound up being the most attached to the researchers. The third group loved the researchers the strongest and was the most dependent upon them. Guy Murchie called this the polarity principle. Stress, including the mental stress of uncertainty, is an ingredient in attachment or love, and perhaps even manifestations of hatred, its polar opposite, somehow enhance love. Uncertainty, psychologically, can lead to some of the greatest feelings of attachment and dependence.
Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud, horse, Rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
Oh. Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
Refuses to go on. The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
Oh. I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one, slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
2/3 of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering for less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
It's fascinating. The Milgram experiment shows that you can actually induce somebody to kill somebody else if there is a person in authority to accept responsibility, a person who can goad you into continuing, staying the course even when your better judgment tells you not to. But here's what a lot of people didn't know about that experiment, and I think you'd be kind of interested to hear this next little section.
Milgram asked 40 psychiatrists individually living in New Haven, Connecticut, probably mostly at the medical school, what % of all Americans would go all the way? Describing the study the way I did, perhaps without the drama, and they said only 1%. They said that's sadistic behavior, and only sadists would engage in sadistic behavior. So that's the base rate. Anything above that is significant. They could not be more wrong. Why were they wrong? Their whole training is training only in the dispositional analysis. For psychiatrists, everything is inside your head. Sadism, goodness, good and evil, everything, they don't deal with good and evil. Sanity and insanity are in your head. And that meant they ignored all of the situational variables, the lab coat, the roles you're playing, the diffusion of responsibility, I'll be responsible, the rules that are changing. And they ignored all of that to say only 1%. We call that the fundamental attribution error. We do it all the time. Every time when we're trying to understand something where we focus primarily on the person and we ignore the situation, that's called the fundamental attribution error. So here's the data. This is the number of subjects who drop out here. So this is nobody drops out up to 28. And this is the amount of shocks. Nobody drops out to 285 volts. Not a single person quits. And now, okay, now what is it? 4 people drop out, 3. And now here's that magical 375. If you get that high, the guy's unconscious or dead, no one drops out. Everybody goes all the way. 2/3, 65% go all the way. Doesn't make sense. Except you've tried everything to get out, nothing is working. At this point you say, I shock 1, 2, 3, and I'm out. So giving him 3 more, he's already dead. He doesn't, what difference does it make? He's not going to feel it. But it's the way to exit. So it's not only a study in blind obedience to authority, which is described. It's a study in not understanding how to exit a horrible situation, where suddenly this just authority is now totally unjust. So the result is not 1%, 65%. Well, this is only one study of many that Milgram did, but people said, you know what? Maybe they really didn't believe he was being shocked. The guy's in the other room, he's yelling. In fact, he wasn't shocked. He was an actor. He was a Confederate. It was all tape recorded, all the screams and so forth. Well, so what Milgram did is to say, let's look at what happens let me put it differently. So 2/3, this is 60%. In many studies, it's 2/3. But you could raise it to over 90%, or you could eliminate it. Study 16 is, if you first see somebody like you appear, administer the shock all the way, you do it. On the other hand, what happens if people rebel? Study 5, if you see two people like you while you're waiting, if they rebel, you rebel. And in these various other studies, it's if you have the guy not remote but closer to you, you don't do it. In fact, how do you eliminate it? Study 1, if the guy says, I want to be shocked, you don't do it. You say, that's sick. I'm not a sadist. I'm not going to deal with a masochist. You don't. But what this is, it really says what Milgram did is he's really quantifying evil. It's almost as if he's putting a human nature dial, and as you turn it, you can have blind obedience to authority go from 0 up to over 90%.
And yet they love playing with your head. Look this way, look that way, look up, look down, no, look left, look right. Until you don't know what is up or down, left or right, back to front. And in that state, your mind is completely malleable. When you get to that state, your mind just becomes numb. Human beings love order. That's why buildings look the way they do, symmetrical. We love things to add up, we love things to be square, we love things to music to finish on a major note so that it resolves. We love resolve. We love mysteries. That's why we read mystery novels. When we solve a crime, we want to know what happened. And so when you turn people's lives upside down, this is almost like a Stockholm Syndrome thing, where you don't know who to turn to find the truth. And as I've said actually quite a few times now, the most important thing I think in the time that we're about to go through coming up is you better know who you are. Anyway, I added this piece by Lionel because I just love Lionel. I will put down some of the links down below so you can check out some of these channels because they're absolutely brilliant. Lionel is brilliant. I think he's fantastic. He's interesting. He is loquistic. Yes, he is a bright light in my daily viewing. Here you go, Lionel.
Through this, and B.F. Skinner taught us this, systematic, gradual habituation, conditioning, getting you used to something slowly. It's like, say, breaking a phobia. You know, there's the implosion therapy. Throw up a snake in. Oh, you're afraid of snakes? Ah! You're afraid of drowning? Throw them in the pond. That doesn't work well. What it works better is when you gradually approach. Let's talk about a snake. Let's take a look at a picture of a snake. We'll go to the zoo, to a herpetarium. Maybe, and then eventually we'll do that. Something else that works even better. There's two ways. I could say, great, I can put the gizmos on them, but now I want to get really nasty with them. And I want them to basically put themselves in prison. I want them to imprison themselves. I want them to live, and I want to scare them. I don't want to use, like the great BBC documentary, The Power of Nightmares. I want to get them and frighten them. And whether it's ISIS or ISIL or IS or IQA or Al-Nusra, and I'm going to throw, as soon as they become conversant with one nefarious group of barbated, beheaders, I'm going to give them another one. I'm going to see how far I can take them. I'm going to take them to the airport, and I'm going to make them take their shoes off and put their shoes on. And I'm going to corral them. I'm going to blast them with backscatter ionizing radiation cancer tubes. I'm going to manhandle and feel up and basically sexually abuse people. See how far they'll go. And I will change the rules. I'll turn the lights on, turn them off. Just when you think it's daytime, it's not. It's not the Stockholm Syndrome. I'm just going to habituate you. And it's called learned helplessness.
And by doing so, they have given us, the electorate, the illusion that we have a choice. When in reality, both the Republican and Democratic parties are owned by the same global elites. And on issues that matter to those global elites, they act as one.
By the time you go to the polls and you put your pencil mark on the paper, or punch the lever, whatever you do, the decisions are already made. The candidates have already been selected. And the work goes on there, is who selects the candidates that the people vote for? Who frames the issues that the people vote for? Voting is nothing. It's all done before that stage. This left-right paradigm is a political ploy. It works very well for those who know what they're doing. We find that the Republican Party and the Democrat Party both are pretty much in the hands of a relatively small group of people with a membership of about 4,000. It's called the Council on Foreign Relations. These are the people that are really pulling the strings in both the Republican and the Democrat Party.
We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
People like Hillary Clinton know, even at that elevated position, Hillary Clinton, you'd say, was one of the big movers and shakers. Compared to the Council on Foreign Relations, she's not. She's a small fish. And she knows that she's got to get the approval of the CFR.
I had a friend, Nick Rockefeller, okay, who was one of the Rockefeller family. The ultimate goal that these people have in mind is to create a one world government. And this is given me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish.
Not just any world government, but a world government based on the model of collectivism. In other words, big, powerful, centralized world government. If it were a world government based on the principles of freedom and freedom of choice, freedom of culture, low intervention, if no intervention in the lives of normal human beings, it might be a wonderful thing, but that's not the kind of world government the left and the right have in mind. They're talking about total world government with all major decisions being made at the top and people at the bottom being peasants, basically, in a high-tech feudalism.
Quite simply, a statist is somebody who believes in having a state. Basically, anybody who wants government. Government is the exercise of authority over a people or place, and that is basically the right to rule. It's not just the ability to control other people, because most people have that in one way or another. It's the right. It's the idea that certain people, it's legitimate for them to forcibly control others. Belief in government is a purely faith-based, indoctrinated belief. It doesn't actually make any sense in practical terms or in evidence or in logic. For years, I thought it was a really good analogy to compare government to religion, and only a few years ago did I realize it's not an analogy. It is a religion in every way. It has a superhuman deity, government, that has rights that mortals don't. It isn't restricted by the rules that apply to mortals. It issues commands, and if you disobey, you're a sinner and you deserve to be punished. The faithful, the true believers, they have great faith in these bizarre rituals, elections and legislation and appointments, and they dress up and then they say, ta-da, now I represent government. I know I just look like a person, but I don't just have the rights of a person because I represent the magical deity called government. And so I'm allowed to demand your money and boss you around and hurt you if you disobey me. I'm acting on behalf of government, and it has commandments called laws. And these laws aren't just the threats of humans. They are decrees from something superhuman. And so all you good people out there should bow to this deity. And if you want the world fixed, this is what you pray to. And we give you certain rituals of how to pray to it and when you're supposed to pray to it. And pray to the God to make the world what you wish it was and to save you from all the uncertainties of reality. The doctrine people are taught is just patently absurd. And a bunch of examples of that are like consent of the governed. There isn't such thing. If it's consent, it's voluntary. If it's being governed, it's not. The actual given excuse is, we have the right to rule you because you decided we did, even if you didn't vote for us, and even if you oppose everything we do to you. And, well, they represent us. Okay, they represent us by doing a lot of things that we don't have the right to do. And they represent us by bossing us around and taking our money. Like, I bet if I went to my neighbor and bossed him around and took his money and said, I'm representing you, he would say, what? What a stupid thing to say. To me, the most insane is, we are the government, which you hear everywhere. And I ask somebody, wait, do you really not notice that there's a group of people over there, they issue threats, and they call them laws, and they issue demands for money, and they call it taxes. And if you disobey, they send men with guns to hurt you. Now, are you really incapable of distinguishing between yourself and them?
You better know who you are, where your heart is, where your spirit is, and where your mind is. Because you are not going to know. In the next couple of years, everything is going to get turned upside down. Okay? And we need to wake up to this fact. We need to start getting along together. We need to stop the polarization. Forget Trump. Forget the things that we're arguing about. This is nonsense. Okay? Trump is just another in a long line of bad presidents. And another thing that is really bugging me is that so many people that I talk to seem to think that all of this just started on the 20th of January. Well, no, it didn't. Obama was dropping bombs every 20 minutes of his presidency. Bill Clinton was as misogynistic and as sexist as it comes. You think Monica Lewinsky was the first person? No, he's the first. It was the first person he got caught with. See, these people don't come forward and tell you stuff unless they actually get caught. When they get caught red-handed, they come out with a handkerchief and start crying in your face and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But if they hadn't got caught, I can swear to God they will not have come forward. And when we get this, when we understand what's being perpetrated on us, then we will create, well, we're starting to create right now, what I call the New World Community. Not the New World Order, but the New World Community.
In a brief video introduced by the United Nations Secretary General Boutros Boutros-Ghali and containing some exceptional footage, the connection between the United Nations, New York City, and the Rockefeller Foundation is clearly drawn.
The future of this country and the lives of our children and our children's children are interwoven with the success of the United Nations. In it lies the hope of the people of the world. My father considers it a privilege to have had a part in the development of its permanent home. I'm glad to hand you, Mr. Lee, my father's check.
Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller.
For every single department of government you have on a federal, local, county, state, provincial level, the United Nations had an equivalent department to deal with everything. It was already set up, in fact, to be global government. H.G. Wells said at the League of Nations, which was the embryo for the United Nations, he said, this is the nucleus of the world governments. When eventually all laws will come from there, be passed and signed into law by treaty of all the member countries. Eventually, we won't even have to go through the farce, and that's what it is, of voting in parties or candidates, because in the latter part of the 20th century and now into the 21st century, we're being trained, rather obviously, to simply accept rule by experts, rule by scientists, rule by professionals, and that's what they mean when they call governance.
2009 is also the first year of global governance, with the establishment of the G20 in the middle of the financial crisis. The climate conference in Copenhagen is another step towards the global management of our planet.
By order of the City of Pittsburgh Chief of Police, I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
If people would just engage a few more brain cells, open the eyes and look, they will see the scale of fascism, no other word for it, that we are being subjected to today.
I remember we had an FBI consultant on the picture telling me that they can use your ADT security box microphone to get your stuff that's going on in your house, or OnStar, they could shut your car down. And he told me that 1 in 5 phone calls that you make are recorded and logged. And I laughed at him, and then he played back a phone conversation I'd had 2 years prior to joining the picture, the FBI consultant. And it was like one of those phone calls, like, you know, what are you wearing type of things.
Really?
Yeah, so it was mad weird.
Wait,
but
so you mean they had a record of you from
2 years prior to me joining the picture.
Even being associated with the movie?
With the movie. Well, that seems creepy. It's extremely creepy.
Tim, is there any way? Now, obviously, it was a voicemail. They could try to get the phone companies to give that up at this point. But if it's not a voicemail, it's just a conversation. There's no way they actually can find out what happened, right? Unless she tells them.
No, there is a way. We certainly have ways in national security investigations to find out exactly what was said in that conversation. It's not necessarily something that the FBI is going to want to present in court, but it may help lead the investigation and/or lead the questioning of her.
So somewhere it's being digitized, or they can actually get that. Because people were saying, look, that wouldn't be possible.
Yes.
It's pretty incredible what you're saying.
No, welcome to America. All of that stuff is being captured as we speak, whether we know it or like it or not.
Note to self, as Deb Farrick just said here, yeah.
First up tonight in the news, yes, the re-education camps do apply to American citizens. I understand this is shocking, but the time for denial is over. Yesterday, of course, we covered the leaked U.S. Army document that outlines the plan for re-education camps in America. I can't believe it either, but yes, they do use the word re-education, and they repeatedly refer to operations inside U.S. territory. Paul Watson has highlighted all the quotes about how the psychological operations officers are going to be brainwashing people in the camps, determining who needs to be indoctrinated, and on, all part of this Department of Defense document for internment and resettlement specialists. So it refers to in the document DCs, that's displaced citizens or civilian internees. It talks about things like implementing policies, quote, within U.S. territory. What we have here is the camps we've been sold under the guise of the war on terror now being legitimized for use with American citizens as they pass the National Defense Authorization Act, authorizing the indefinite detention of even American citizens without any due process. This is a slippery slide into tyranny, and these detainment camps are, of course, the end of the road for anything we can consider to be freedom. It's based on North Korean models, Soviet Gulag models, Nazi concentration camp models, and more, and they're really looking to bring it here.
I have two words for you: predator drones. You will never see it coming.
All collectivist systems eventually deteriorate into a police state because it's the only way you can hold it together.
My friendship with Nick Rockefeller was one where we expressed ideas to each other and thoughts and philosophies, and he wanted me to become part of what they were doing and for me to become a member of the CFR. And I used to say to him, what's the point of all this? You have all the money in the world you need. You have all the power you need. What's the point? You know, what's the end goal? And he said the end goal is to get everybody chipped, to control the whole society, to have the elite people controlling the world.
They talked about Pat running for president, and if he did that, I would be very supportive. But he'd have to shake a label that gets assigned to people like Pat who run for the presidency, and that is that he's a tool of the rich. I personally like that very much. My father told me that's the way the system is meant to work. You know, I think Pat's coming quickly. Soon, I think he's going to be in a position for the Trilateral Commission. And if he shows promise beyond that, there's Bilderberg. World control, Pat. Settle for nothing else.
And so they keep you confused. Up is down is up, back is front, and front is back. And when we are in that state, we are very controllable. When we do not know what is going on, we love order. Okay, we love order. So you can imagine what effect this kind of ploy has on us poor old humans.
At the top of this conspiracy are a handful of ultra-wealthy multi-billionaires in the world. Some of them have been conspiring for more than a century. Their tools are the Council on Foreign Relations the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, and they have tools in other countries as well.
Now, they've taken over our government, both Republicans and Democrats. There's no difference anymore between the two parties. They control both parties. It doesn't matter to them which one wins, because who's ever running for president will be someone they anoint. And the fact of the matter happens to be that you can't win an election unless you have enough money to win. They make sure who gets the money.
And they've even written about it. There's a fellow by the name of Carroll Quigley, and he wrote several books about this group of people and their origins and their roots coming from Europe and England in particular. And he comes to a very interesting point in one of his books where he says, okay, this is the way the real world is. He said, how is it that we collectivists, we elitists, how can we rule the world when at the same time we want to let the average person think that they're living in a, quote, democracy? And he answers the question brilliantly. He said, it's very simple. You've got to have two major political parties, and they'll both have the same major goals, the same basic fundamental principles, and they'll argue with each other on the surface with slogans and leadership and style and all of that sort of thing. He said, but we will control them both. There's the strategy. There's the whole scam behind this left-right paradigm. When you understand this history and this reality, you look at it and you say, well, yes, we've got a left wing and a right wing, but they're just opposite wings of the same ugly bird. And we have our cheerleaders, you know, the news commentators and the talk show hosts on the left and on the right, and they frame the debate. They won't let the American people debate the real issues. They won't let them even think about the real issues, which are we going to keep American sovereignty or not? Are we going to let the Federal Reserve System, which is a banking cartel, continue to run our government or not? They won't let us talk about those things.
Ron Paul, what's your perspective on how the media has been ignoring him and demonizing him?
It's fascinating. I must say, the more I listen to and the more I read what Ron Paul has to say, the more fascinated and the more respect I have for this guy, because this guy's got courage. He understands that people want to be set free from big government, and he's not, you know, he's not scared of taking on any issue at all. And you know, I watch him. There was one of the primaries the other day where Ron Paul got 27%, an amazing figure, and yet the BBC virtually refuse to even admit the fact that he's actually contesting the race. And I understand that many conventional parts of the US media have been the same.
And by the way, this pretending Ron Paul doesn't exist for some reason has been going on for weeks.
A new Gallup survey showing Rick Perry running second to Mitt Romney, knocking down Iowa favorite Michelle Bachmann to fourth.
Behind who? Fourth behind who? How did Libertarian Ron Paul become the 13th floor in a hotel?
And it's kind of, you get a Ron Paul figure that comes along and challenges basic assumptions. And perhaps, to some extent, I've tried to do some of the same things over on this side of the Atlantic. And it's like a media blackout.
That tells you there's the evidence that it's controlled.
The owners of this country are the voters of this country.
You're wrong about that, my friend.
Aren't the owners of this country the voters in this country who elected George Bush?
No, they're not. Listen, politics, these elections are a charade. It is a charade.
Oh, okay.
It is, they are meant to, well, I'll tell you, listen, just listen for a minute. Learn a little something. The elections and politicians are in place in order to give Americans the illusion that they have freedom of choice. You don't really have choice in this country.
This is not a party issue. This is not a left-right issue. The question is not, should we have big government or little government? The question is, who should government serve? And it should serve the people. And it hasn't been doing it, and it still isn't doing it. And changing from Republican to Democrat or Democrat to Republican is not going to change that.
So that's the problem. As long as we depend on the phony wrestlers and depend upon their well-paid cheerleaders in the media to keep us focused on secondary issues, we're never going to get out of this mess.
Well, that about wraps it up for me, Hound Dog Steve, and I hope you liked this little sort of documentary that I put together. And please do try and stay calm. Remember, this is all a distraction. Trump is a distraction. What we need to work on is cooperatively getting together the new world community. This is the answer. And we need to be friends, we need to be moderate, and neither left-wing nor right-wing radicalization. We need to be a community. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and as usual, please like and subscribe below, and we will talk soon. Have a great evening. Bye-bye now.